Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to introduce you tonight to Paula Cruickshank. She is the Senior Vice President for Ontario at the Business Development Bank of Canada, BDC. She's got over 23 years of experience in the banking industry. She joined BDC in 2009 as a Vice President for Securitization. She was responsible there for establishing the bank's indirect financing group and assumed responsibility for the management of their $12 billion Canadian secured credit facility. $12 billion. In 2009, she helped start and restart the asset-backed securities market and stimulate economic activity by supporting sales of vehicles and equipment. We're going to talk a little bit more about her background and about Business Development Bank of Canada, what they can do for us, and why we as taxpayers should be supporting such a thing as the Business Development Bank of Canada. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Brian. Great to be here.
So tell me, why would you, after a long career with other banks, want to join BDC? And what are you trying to do there?
Well, it was 14 years ago. It was a financial crisis. And this was a super opportunity for me to be able to help a market that was very important to the Canadian financial landscape. So that was a very different time. I was able to work to establish a new business. I became an entrepreneur for the bank, basically putting together a platform to help small finance companies, as well as working on the $12 billion program that you mentioned. That was for larger companies. And it really meant that credit was not stopped for small businesses or in terms of their finance companies that they work with. It was really important at the time. I then went on to work with our venture capital group for a little while. And finally, about 8 years into my career with BDC, I started working in the core business, really what we do on a day-to-day basis, which is providing debt financing to entrepreneurs as well as advice. So the way I was able to do that was by heading out to Vancouver. For the first time, I left Toronto. I'd been working in Toronto for 22 years, and I headed out to BC and learned about working directly with entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes, and was able to grow our BC and North business by a significant margin, basically doubled the business there.
Excellent.
And was able to then come back to Ontario, which was, of course, a much bigger market. And so that's where I've been since June 2020. It wasn't a great time to move, but it's certainly been very rewarding to work with entrepreneurs as they come out of the pandemic and to help them take a look at where the economy is going today and help them with advice as well as all the various types of financing that we can help them with.
Why should the Canadian government, Canadian taxpayers, support something like a bank, a BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada? Doesn't Bank of Nova Scotia and Bank of Montreal and Toronto Dominion Bank and Royal Bank and, et cetera, provide all the help to entrepreneurs and to businesses that we possibly could need?
Those businesses do a wonderful job. They're there to work with businesses, provide all sorts of innovative types of financing. But ultimately, those businesses are beholden to their shareholders as well. Sometimes there's gaps in the Canadian financing system. Sometimes there's entrepreneurs that are underrepresented. Sometimes there's businesses that are growing too quickly or just a little too risky for the private sector. And that's why BDC can step in. BDC is a crown corporation. So we're here for the long term. We can provide capital, we can provide debt or capital over a longer period of time than a bank might be able to. And the real difference, I think, is that we're interested in the business growing because that's better for Canada's economy. That's better for that entrepreneur. They're able to employ more people and ultimately contribute to the economy. So that the orientation is a little bit different. And it means that our services are more tailored to the entrepreneur and the challenges that they have. In particular, I think about our advisory services around that.
So are you, by definition, therefore, taking on riskier loans than private banks would be doing, or
I think
longer
some,
term loans, or what?
yeah, we provide a longer amortization period. So businesses are able to put a payment over a longer period of time. So that's one aspect of it. The other piece is we really are able to take the time to delve into the business plan and understand where that business is going. The fact that we don't have to raise money in the capital markets, that we're able to get our money, our debt financing from the government, does certainly help with our risk levels. We still have to be sustainable. We usually pay a dividend back to the government. So we run the business well, but we're able to take a little more risk than the banks.
So, I had an economist on my show a little while ago talking about state-owned banks in China, and how that was just an incredible problem because they were making, he would argue, uneconomic loans, that they were financing. I think he called them zombie companies that should have gone under. And if they were reliant on private sector funding, they would have gone under. Is that a risk with BDC?
I don't think it's a risk because we price for risk. There's not a situation where we're providing loans that are super cheap. We look at a risk model that requires us to put together information that is much better. It allows us to look at things over the longer term. And so we are able to price something for risk. It means that basically the entrepreneurs are not going to be subject to a lot of ups and downs, but we're able to provide that return back to the government for sure.
Tell me, what's a BDC strategic direction? Where do you think you're going as an institution?
So we're definitely moving into a place under our new president, Isabelle Hudon. We're moving to a place where we want to empower a nation of dreamers and doers to build a better tomorrow for all. So it's a really uplifting and inclusive vision. And we've got some ways that we've broken it down to make sure we spur the growth of entrepreneurs and the competitiveness of Canada's economy. That's super important. We're increasing the reach and relevance of our support to entrepreneurs. We're empowering entrepreneurs to respond to the big challenges of our time, like climate change and economic uncertainty. And we're also working towards a world-class employee and client experience, using a lot of digitization in that respect, but really working to support the 95,000 clients that we have across the country.
I had another economist on my show that said that the challenge that we've got is we have a real lack of productivity in Canada. And one of the reasons why is that real estate has been such an easy place and such a value creating place for developers to invest in and banks to finance in, and that too much of the capital from the major banks has been invested in a unproductive sector of the economy, real estate. And we haven't had enough left over to lend into the entrepreneurs. And he argued that institutions like yours will finance cash flow companies, and a lot of the major institutions are only interested in the ones that have got huge assets. Tell me, is that true? And is there a difference in an asset lending versus cash flow lending?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that we work pretty hard to look at the cash flows of a business, but it goes beyond that. The productivity is really around that investment into equipment investment into the new ways of doing things in those businesses, automation. So many businesses are really struggling with labor challenges. The only way we can get around those labor challenges is by eliminating repetitive tasks, perhaps through automation and digitization, and drive better efficiency in those businesses. So yes, by looking at the business in a holistic perspective, and that's what a cash flow does. It causes you to look at how that business is working and how it's generating profitability over a period of time, versus separating it and looking into the particular assets like real estate. I think you can start to drive productivity. But again, it comes down to more than just the money. It's also about the advice and working with our advisory folks to be able to help those businesses come up with new ideas to be able to run their business better.
Our guest tonight is Paula Cruickshank. She is the Senior Vice President for Ontario at the Business Development Bank of Canada. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Paula. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Our topic tonight is really the financing of entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprises. And our guest is Paula Cruickshank. She is the Senior Vice President of Ontario at the Business Development Bank of Canada, BDC. Paula's got a pretty impressive resume. She's got a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Carleton University, an MBA from the Schulich School of Business at York University, and a law degree from Osgoode Hall at York University. She spent over 9 years at Scotiabank in numerous different structured financing areas, and then she's been for more than 14 years at BDC as Senior Vice President in Ontario, and then Ontario in Digital, and then BC, and now back in Ontario. But the most impressive thing on your resume is that you're the on-ice assistant for the Vancouver Thunderbirds Hockey Association. Tell me, what does the on-ice assistant for the Vancouver Thunderbirds Hockey Association do?
Well, I was helping my son and his friends. Basically, that was a lot of fun. I went to Carleton University, so I learned to skate pretty well on the canal. And so that was a wonderful opportunity to go out and help the kids on the ice when they were around 5 or 6, and just learning the basic skills of hockey. So that was lots of fun.
Let's take a big step back, if we could, and tell me, what do you think the challenges are for financing of small and medium-sized companies in Canada?
So many challenges. We actually just put out a study today about the rising costs of doing business. It's remarkable that over the last few years, the inputs, those costs, have gone up about 6 times. So between 20 and 21, the usual increase was about 6%. Prior to that, the annual average increase was 1%. So if you can imagine trying to run your business profitably when the inputs, whether that's labor, commodities, automation, all those types of things, but also financing, are increasing, it's a very difficult environment for entrepreneurs.
And so, given that challenging environment, BDC is doing what? You're taking a look at those entrepreneurs that deserve the financing and give them what, cheaper debt than the private sector would provide, or more debt, or debt that they wouldn't be able to get in the private sector, or longer amortization, or all of the above?
I would say that typically our financing is a little bit more expensive because it tends to be more flexible. So yeah, it might be a company that couldn't get financing from a bank, but sometimes there are companies that can get financing, but not on the same terms. So there's a way to basically finance the companies that we're working with, and it's um, uh, to be able to give them options. That's really what we're looking to do, is to give entrepreneurs options. And the the ability to finance them is really something we spend a lot of time understanding. So we work with them and are able to move forward based on the project that they're proposing. And it's term financing. We're not going to be there for their everyday banking. They're going to do that through the chartered banks, but we'll be there for the projects when they want to change their equipment, when they want to buy another business, when they want to start a new marketing line, something like that. We're able to provide the working capital or the equipment financing or the real estate financing to help them do that.
Would you participate in a syndicated loan by another institution, or do you syndicate your loans to other institutions, or no, you're just 100% yourself?
So we do have a syndication department, and that's a group that would work with larger companies, certainly. We will work beside another bank. So we would do what we call a pari passu loan. There's all sorts of different opportunities that we'll pursue. The vast majority of what we do is lending on our own book, but we certainly will participate in syndications. We're not going to lead a transaction. We'd be there for institutions that need additional financing to fill out a syndicate.
Right. You've run the businesses, the company's operation in British Columbia and now in Ontario. Are there differences between BC and Ontario as far as entrepreneurs and what you need to do to help them?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest difference for Ontario versus BC would be the number of manufacturing companies that we have. So in Ontario, our book would be about 27% manufacturing companies. And when I was in BC, there were probably around 17% of the financing that we were providing that was to manufacturing companies. So the composition of the economy is quite different. In Ontario, we're super lucky to have as many manufacturers as we do. And that's a place where we love to play. Food and beverage manufacturing, automotive manufacturing, there's a whole variety. The construction group, construction financing is good as well. Those are all businesses where we're able to add value to the entrepreneurs.
In your resume, one other thing, other than being the on-ice assistant, that's interesting is that you were responsible for digitization. Tell me what the companies, what the banks and what the companies need to be thinking about in regards to digitization.
Yeah, it's really about being able to identify those repetitive tasks or tasks that can be more streamlined, bringing in the information for your business and moving from Excel sheets, for example. But there's a lot of tools out there. There's many different providers, and we've benefited from them at the bank as well. So we took processes, for example, taking a client's ID. That's a typical task that we have to have our account managers do. And we were able to provide or to find a company that can do that online. So the software is able to match a photo with a photo of someone's ID and determine whether or not the person we're working with is in fact who they say they are. So there's all types of software. When you start looking at the particular tasks or the particular things that your business is doing, you'll find that there's digital tools out there. So it's a little bit about understanding what it is that your business is doing, looking at the processes that you do over and over again to find solutions, and most importantly, taking the data out of your business and feeding it back in so that you can improve the business over time.
I wonder if you could give me an example of some entrepreneur that you met that had a big challenge, and what BDC and you did to help solve it.
Yeah, I think that probably a good example would be I was out visiting a client a little while ago. This was a printing client, and they were putting together packaging for a number of different companies. They looked really closely at their processes. Packaging today is quite complicated. There's a lot of marketing that goes into the packaging, and the printing of it is quite complicated. So they worked day and night to figure out how best to get. They were finding machines that could deliver the types of packaging that their clients wanted. And bit by bit, they ended up replacing a whole number of processes on the floor and limiting the repetitive tasks that their people were doing. So piece by piece, they would put in a new piece of equipment, and it became quite efficient. We were able to be there to finance each new piece of equipment, and they drove all sorts of inefficiencies right out of the floor. So it worked really, really well with them working at it over time. We've got advisory folks who are free to advise on operational efficiency, and they're able to help bring solutions to plant layouts and that type of thing. So
Advisory people. So it sounds like you almost supply some consulting advice at the same time.
yeah, that's exactly right. They're very focused on the typical problems that entrepreneurs have. So sales and marketing, operational efficiency, financial management, human resources management as well. Those are some of the basic challenges in a business today.
If people are intrigued by this conversation and think that they should be reaching out to BDC because BDC might be able to finance their growth or their equipment purchases or something like that, what should they do? How do they contact you or someone at BDC?
So I think the best thing is to look up the business center in your particular part of the town, your particular part of Toronto. We have about 14 business centers across the GTA. There's 33 across all of Ontario. So you just put in your community and BDC, and you'll be able to be contacted with a business center. There's also a 1-800 number that you can contact, but we can return that call and line you up with someone who can talk to you about your business.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And I presume there's probably a BDC website as well.
There is a BDC website, bdc.ca. There's lots of free information on there. You might want to check it out before you give someone a call. But certainly our account managers and our business center managers are always ready to help out. We also put a lot of information out there in terms of webinars and reports. Our economist is always looking at the types of decisions that businesses can take to improve how their business is running.
Paula Cruickshank, is there one last thing that you want everyone listening tonight to think about?
Sure. We have one of these webinars coming up. So we are certainly here to help GTA entrepreneurs address their challenges and growth opportunities. That's the first thing. And if you wanted to check out a webinar on how to help manage the rising costs of doing business, there's one on June 13th at 12 p.m. Check it out at bdc.ca.
Well, I've got to tell you, I've been a client of yours in a couple of different situations, and frankly, I negotiated with you on one instance that was in workout and had a big strategy. And I got to tell you, I've been very impressed with both the advisory people and the banking people that I've interacted with at Business Development Bank Canada. And so, thank you very much for the role that you play in the Canadian economy. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thanks for joining us.